The notification on my phone screen lit up the dark mahogany of the conference table at exactly 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was a singular, silent pulse that signaled the end of my brother's life as he knew it, though he wouldn't realize it for another 6 days. I was in the middle of a merger negotiation between two pharmaceutical giants in downtown Chicago, my hand hovering over a clause regarding intellectual property rights, when the alert from the perimeter security system at my private residence pinged. I swiped it open under the table. The camera feed showed a silver Audi Q7 pulling into my driveway, a car that belonged to my older brother, Julian. He wasn't supposed to be there. In fact, he didn't have a key, and he didn't know the gate code. I watched in high-definition silence as his wife, Bianca, leaned out of the passenger window and punched a sequence into the keypad. The gate swung open. They had the code. There were only 3 people in the world who had that code. Me, my housekeeper who had been with me for 10 years, and my mother. I locked the phone, placed it face down, and turned back to the opposing counsel with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I am Darius Thorne, 38 years old, the managing partner of Thorne and Holloway, a forensic accounting firm that specializes in dismantling corporate fraud. My entire career is built on finding the one line in a 10,000-page ledger that doesn't add up. My family, however, still treats me like the antisocial mistakes of the litter because I missed my niece's dance recital 3 years ago to testify in a federal embezzlement case. They think I push paper. They think I am simply lucky. They have absolutely no idea that the man they ridicule behind his back is the same man whose signature is required to clear their debts. I finished the negotiation at 4 p.m. and drove home, the silence of the cabin allowing me to construct the timeline. Julian and Bianca had been crying poverty for months. Julian had lost his job as a mid-level marketing manager 6 months ago, a fact they had tried to hide until the lease on their luxury condo came up for renewal. Bianca, an influencer with less than 5,000 followers, refused to work a standard 9-to-5, claiming it would damage her personal brand. Instead of cutting back, they had leaned harder on the image of success, leasing new cars and posting vacation photos from Tulum while defaulting on their credit cards. I knew this because I had bailed them out once before, a quiet transfer of $15,000 that I was told would save the family. I never asked for it back. I never mentioned it. I just paid it. That was my mistake. When you feed a wolf, it doesn't learn gratitude. It learns where the meat is kept. When I arrived at my house, the Audi was gone. The gate was closed. Nothing looked disturbed. I walked into the foyer, the marble cool under my shoes, and went straight to the security server room in the basement. I pulled the logs. They had been inside for 12 minutes. I scrubbed through the interior camera footage. They hadn't taken the TV. They hadn't taken the artwork. They had walked straight to my home office. On the screen, I watched Julian hesitate at the door, looking over his shoulder. Bianca pushed him inside. She went to the filing cabinet behind my desk, the one that requires a physical key. She pulled a key from her purse. My mother's key. I froze the frame. They rifled through the folders until Bianca found what she was looking for, a thick blue binder. She held it up, kissed it, and shoved it into her oversized tote bag. Then they left. I walked upstairs and checked the cabinet. The binder was gone. It contained the deed to the family lake house in Michigan. The lake house was the only asset my grandfather had left behind. It was a sprawling timber-framed estate on the water, worth roughly $3 million in the current market. Legally, the deed was in my name. I paid the property taxes, the maintenance, and the insurance. But emotionally, the family considered it ours. Julian and Bianca had been pressuring me to sell it for over a year, arguing that we should split the proceeds so they could invest their share in a tech startup Bianca's cousin was launching. I had told them no. Repeatedly. Firmly. I told them the house was a legacy asset, intended to be kept in the trust for future generations. Clearly, no was a word they didn't understand. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I didn't call my mother to ask why Julian had her spare key. I poured myself a glass of scotch, sat in the leather chair they had just vacated, and opened my laptop. I logged into the county clerk's online portal for the district in Michigan where the house was located. I set up a real-time alert for any filings related to the property. Then I called my contact at the title company, a woman named Sarah who owed me a favor after I helped her firm navigate a sticky audit last year. I told her that if a transfer of deed or a loan application using the lake house as collateral crossed her desk, she was to let it process right up until the final signature, and then send me the paperwork. She agreed. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the mouse to take the cheese. The wait wasn't long. 2 days later, my mother called. Her voice was shrill, breathless with an excitement that sounded forced. She told me that Sunday was going to be a celebration of New Beginnings dinner at her house. She insisted I come. She said Julian had some big news, that things were finally turning around for him, and that he wanted the whole family there to celebrate. She told me explicitly to leave the work attitude at the door and just be happy for my brother for once. I agreed. I told her I would bring the champagne. Saturday morning, the alerts started rolling in. An application for a hard money loan, a high-interest predatory loan used by desperate real estate flippers, had been submitted to a private lender in Detroit. The collateral, the lake house. The loan amount, $1.2 million. The borrower, Darius Thorne. The co-borrower, Julian Thorne. They had forged my signature. Not only had they stolen the deed to prove ownership, but they were impersonating me to secure cash. They weren't trying to sell the house. They were trying to strip the equity out of it, take the cash, and leave me with the debt. Since the house was paid off, the lender saw it as a safe bet. The documents Sarah sent me showed a signature that looked remarkably like mine, likely traced from a birthday card or a check I had written years ago. The notary stamp was from a friend of Bianca's, a woman I had met once at a barbecue who looked at me like I was a wallet with legs. They were going to close on the loan Monday morning. The wire transfer was scheduled for noon. They were celebrating on Sunday because they thought they had already won. I spent Saturday night compiling the dossier. I didn't sleep. I didn't feel the need to. There is a specific kind of adrenaline that comes from forensic deconstruction, a cold, sharp clarity that makes every detail stand out in high relief. I pulled Julian's credit report. I pulled Bianca's. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just broke. They were drowning. They had 3 maxed-out credit cards, a repossessed BMW that they were hiding in a friend's garage to avoid the tow truck, and a lawsuit pending from a wedding planner they had never paid. The tech startup they wanted to invest in didn't exist. The LLC was registered to Bianca's name, using a P.O. box. They were going to take the $1.2 million, pay off their debts, and likely blow the rest on maintaining the facade of their life. If I hadn't caught it, the lender would have eventually foreclosed on the lake house when they stopped making payments, seizing the only thing my grandfather had built. I printed everything. The security logs. The video frames of them breaking into my office. The forged loan application. The fake notary acknowledgement. The credit reports. The LLC registration. I bound it all in a black leather folder, identical to the one I used for court cases. Sunday evening arrived with a torrential downpour, fitting weather for an execution. I pulled up to my parents' house, a modest 2-story in the suburbs that I had paid off for them 5 years ago, a fact they rarely mentioned. The windows were glowing with warm light. I could see shadows moving inside. I checked the black folder on the passenger seat, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the rain. When I walked in, the atmosphere was electric. My aunts and uncles were there, cousins I hadn't seen in months, all holding glasses of wine and laughing. Julian was in the center of the room, holding court. He looked manic, his eyes too bright, his gestures too wide. Bianca was clinging to his arm, wearing a dress that likely cost more than their mortgage payment. When they saw me, the room quieted slightly. My reputation as the cold one preceded me. Julian stepped forward, a smug grin plastered on his face. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, squeezing a little too hard. He told the room that he was glad I made it, that he knew I was busy counting beans. But family comes first. A few cousins chuckled. I removed his hand from my shoulder and told him I wouldn't miss it for the world. Dinner was an elaborate affair. Roast beef, expensive wine, crystal glasses. My mother kept shooting me warning glances, as if daring me to ruin the mood. I ate in silence, watching them. I watched Bianca whisper in Julian's ear. I watched my father beam with pride every time Julian mentioned his new venture. Finally, as the dessert was being served, Julian stood up. He tapped his glass with a fork. The room went silent. He announced that he and Bianca had officially secured funding for a massive project, a venture capital firm that would revolutionize the way local businesses handled marketing. He said they were finally independent, that they had done it on their own, with grit and determination. He looked at me when he said it. He said he was tired of people thinking he needed handouts. He said he had leveraged his own assets to make it happen. My mother clapped, tears in her eyes. She said she always knew he was the visionary of the family. Bianca added that they were looking at buying a vacation home in the south of France with the projected profits next year. The audacity was breathtaking. They were toasting to a crime they had committed against the very person sitting across from them. "That's impressive, Julian," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the applause like a razor. I didn't stand up. I stayed seated, leaning back in my chair, swirling the red wine in my glass. "Which assets specifically did you leverage?" The room went deadly quiet. My mother's smile faltered. "Darius, don't start," she hissed. "Not tonight." "It's a simple question," I continued, keeping my eyes on my brother. "You said you leveraged your own assets. I'm just curious. Since the condo is leased and the car is hidden in a garage in Naperville to avoid repossession, what assets are we talking about?" Bianca turned pale. Julian's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. "We have investors. Private partners." "Is the partner me?" I asked. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the black folder. I dropped it on the table. It landed with a heavy thud that rattled the silverware. "Because according to the paperwork you filed with Detroit Lending Group on Thursday, I am the primary borrower on a $1.2 million loan against the Michigan Lake House." My father looked confused. "The lake house? That belongs to Darius. You can't borrow against that." "They can if they forge my signature and steal the deed from my home office," I said. I opened the folder. I didn't pass it around. I held up the first photo, the high-resolution print of Bianca punching in the gate code. "Tuesday, 2:14 p.m. You enter my property." I held up the second photo. 2:21 p.m. You enter my office." I held up the third. 2:26 p.m. You leave with the deed." Julian looked like he was going to vomit. Bianca stood up, knocking her chair over. "This is illegal," she screamed. "You can't record us. That's invasion of privacy." "It's my house, Bianca," I said calmly. "I can record whatever I want. But let's talk about illegal." I pulled out the loan application. Wire fraud. Bank fraud. Identity theft. Forgery. Grand larceny. In the state of Illinois and Michigan, you are looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Each. My mother stood up, shaking. "Darius, stop it. You are making this up. Julian would never." "Look at him, Mom," I said, pointing at my brother. He was slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. He wasn't denying it. He was crying. A pathetic, silent weeping. "I called the lender this morning," I lied. "I hadn't called them yet. I wanted the confrontation first. I told them I didn't sign the papers. They were very interested. They have a fraud division. They work with the FBI. You called the police?" My father's voice was a whisper. He looked at Julian with a mixture of horror and heartbreak. "Not yet," I said. I wanted to see if he had the decency to tell the truth. But clearly, the visionary of the family is just a thief. Bianca lunged for the folder. I anticipated it. I slid it out of reach and stood up. "Don't touch it. This is the only copy that keeps you out of handcuffs right now." "Please," Julian choked out. "Darius, please." We were desperate. The debts, they're going to kill us. We just needed a bridge. We were going to pay it back before you even knew. "With what money?" I asked. "The money from the imaginary startup? Or the money you owe the wedding planner? Or the $80,000 in credit card debt?" I tossed his credit report onto the centerpiece. "You weren't going to pay it back. You were going to spend it, lose the house, and let me deal with the fallout. You were going to steal our grandfather's legacy to buy purses and pretend you're rich." My mother was sobbing now. She looked at me pleading. "Darius, he's your brother. You can't send him to jail. Fix this. You always fix it. Just pay the loan off or tell them it was a mistake. You have so much money. You won't even miss it." That was the moment. The moment I realized that no matter what they did, I would always be the villain if I didn't let them bleed me dry. If I called the police, I was the bad son who destroyed the family. If I paid it, I was the doormat. No, I said. The word hung in the air. I am not fixing this. I am not paying a dime. And I am not covering for him. I picked up the folder. Here is what is going to happen. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I am meeting with the lender to formally file the affidavit of forgery. That will kill the loan. The money will not be wired. The police will be notified automatically by the bank. It is out of my hands. You can't. Bianca shrieked. We already spent money based on that loan. We wrote checks. If they bounce, we go to jail anyway. Then I suggest you start packing, I said. I looked at my parents. And since you gave them the key to my house, Mom, I'm changing the locks and the gate code tonight. Do not come over. Do not call me. I walked to the door. Julian ran after me, grabbing my arm. Darius, I'm your blood. You can't destroy me over money. I shook him off, harder this time. He stumbled back into the wall. I'm not destroying you over money, Julian. I'm destroying you because you looked me in the eye, toasted to my success, and stabbed me in the back. You didn't steal from a stranger. You stole from me. And you brought her, I pointed at Bianca, into my home to do it. I walked out into the rain. I didn't look back. I drove straight to my office, scanned every document in the folder, and emailed the PDF to my lawyer and the fraud department of Detroit Lending Group. I hit send at 10:42 p.m. The fallout was nuclear. The loan was canceled on Monday morning. The checks Julian and Bianca had written, post-dated checks to loan sharks and creditors, bounced. By Wednesday, Julian was arrested at his rented condo. They charged him with identity theft and attempted grand larceny. Bianca was arrested 2 days later. She tried to board a flight to Cabo, but her passport was flagged. My parents tried to intervene. They mortgaged their own house, the one I had paid off, to pay for Julian's legal defense. They called me every day, screaming, crying, begging. I blocked their numbers. I hired a private security detail to stand guard at my office and my home. The trial lasted 3 months. I testified against my brother. I sat on the stand in a tailored suit and calmly explained how he had broken into my home and forged my name. I watched his lawyer try to paint me as the jealous, wealthy brother who wanted to keep the struggling artist down. The jury didn't buy it. The evidence was absolute. The video footage of the break-in was the nail in the coffin. Julian was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Bianca took a plea deal, turning on Julian to save herself. She got 2 years probation and a felony record that meant she would never work in finance or real estate again. She divorced him before he even reported to prison. My parents lost their house. The legal fees drained their retirement. They moved into a small apartment on the south side. They sent me a letter a year later, saying they forgave me for what I did and that if I wanted to come for Christmas, the door was open. They still didn't get it. They thought they were the ones offering forgiveness. I shredded the letter. I still own the lake house. I go there in the summers. I sit on the dock, drinking coffee, watching the sun rise over the water. It is quiet. It is peaceful. Some people in town whisper that I'm the man who put his own brother in prison. They think I'm cold. They think I'm lonely. They don't understand that peace is expensive, and I was finally willing to pay the price. I didn't lose a family. I lost a liability. And in my line of work, once you write off a loss, you never look back at the ledger.